Would you abort your child? It was going to be born with severe disabilities. Why or why not? Yup. I had a child with severe disabilities and watched her suffer for months before she finally died. I would not wish that on any child. Severe? Yes. I watched my nephew suffer for 8 years. He was okay, as in content, for the first few years he loved lights and colors, and because he couldn't walk. He was obsessed with feet, he would roll on the floor. And my dad lowered his fish tank for him, it was his favorite, and we all wore funny socks and slippers, and oh my god. His laughter when my sister would wear these slippers of reindeers with bells on them. It was a musical laugh. Very happy. He had a feeding tube. And loved cuddles. Sweet baby. But always a baby, even at 50 pounds. Very hard on my sister. BC his dad left as soon as my nephew was diagnosed, 3 months. But as my nephew's illness progressed, so did his pain. By the end, he was in pain 24/7. He was a child, really. A baby. BC even though he was 8, he didn't have an 8-year-old's mental capacity. And all he knew was pain. I couldn't do that to a person if I could prevent it. My sister had no idea he was disabled when she was pregnant. BTW. I don't know what she would have done if she had known. But she didn't. All tests were normal. He died at home, he had seizure after seizure. And eventually either he stopped breathing or his heart stopped. They don't know which happened first. My sister has, obviously, never been the same. Also, my other nephew also had PTSD from seeing his brother so sick. It's so hard, on everyone. I could not do it. My wife did. The fetus tested positive for Edward syndrome, https://n. Wikipedia. Org wiki Edward syndrome. Just given those test results. The chance of a live birth dropped to 5%. Assuming the baby was born, the median life expectancy was measured in days. Likely disabilities include kidney malformations, structural heart defects at birth, intestines protruding outside the body, esophageal atresia, intellectual disability, developmental delays, growth deficiency, feeding difficulties, breathing difficulties, and arthrogryposis. Skimming Wikipedia. Apparently results have got better since we dealt with this, but still nothing like good quality of life. So she had the abortion. It was a relatively easy decision as these things go. That was her first pregnancy. The second one was healthy. Our daughter is in school at the moment. She's tiring and often annoying. But in age-appropriate ways. If my wife didn't have the abortion, we probably wouldn't have had her. We might not have been able to. The first pregnancy could have caused health problems. And we might not have wanted to. Given the expense and trauma we would have gone through. When abortion bans are in the news. I often think, if that had been the law for us, our daughter wouldn't be alive. Yes, absolutely. I worked in a pediatric ICU for 4 years, and medicine has gotten too good at keeping people alive. Kids would sit for months and months connected to CRRT, dialysis, and ECMO, heart-lung machine, literally wasting away before ultimately dying. And when they die they don't resemble anything like a kid. They look like puffy little aliens who sometimes have lost the perfusion to their hands and feet, so now they're dead and black. It's horrific and I can't imagine putting a child through that. I also cannot imagine spending my days sitting in a hospital room watching that happen to my child. Absolutely I would abort. I grew up with a sister who was held back at birth. Her highest measurable IQ is 2 years 6 months at feeding herself. She is in her mid-late 60s now. No one in our very large family had a normal childhood. We all had to watch her and take care of her. She's older than me. But I still had to take care of her toilet needs, and I often had to clean up floors, furniture and laundry. Plus her. When I wasn't even a teenager yet. As I was closest in age. It fell to me to be her caregiver and eventually her guardian. A large part of my life has been devoted to her. I knew very early on that I would never want to give birth to a mentally challenged kid. I lived in fear that my own child would be held back and end up oxygen deprived and be like her. I never had a clue what a real childhood should be until I got a lot older. I often think how different the lives of my siblings, parents and myself would be. Had she been born as a normal person. I could never willingly give birth to a mentally disabled person and mess the lives of my other kids and my spouse up so drastically. Don't get me wrong. I love my sister. But the sacrifices, the workload, and the mental and emotional pain is a steep price for a kid or a parent to pay. I grew up next to a family with a special needs daughter. I will not throw any shade at people for their decisions. Whether it is to abort, to raise and love, to ask the state to care for such a child. It is complicated and personal. But me, as a witness to all that, I have spicy opinions. Over the course of 15 years I witnessed that family get absolutely wrecked. Parents never ever happy. Older brother de facto caregiver. Resentful because his life suffering. All plans for college and retirement fucked by absurd medical costs of caring for the special needs child. On summer days when the windows were open we could hear them all arguing and yelling at each other. Always about her. On top of that was the usual stuff of her getting bullied in the neighborhood. Or at school. And constant medical problems. I would characterize her life as mostly suffering and mental distress. And the entire fact that most everyone feels school is pointless for such a person, and that anyone doing that kind of thing is foolish and wasting time. Not my op, and the child unceremoniously died to a respiratory infection right around the time I was entering college. Which fucked them up even more, because although it was 15 years of thankless non-stop work, now they didn't have to do 15 more years of that. They exhibited clear signs of survivor guilt. Parents eventually divorced. House got sold, older brother moved away. They all had permanent frazzly hair, crowns, drab shitty clothes. All in all, I think even the most relentless optimist would have a hard time pulling a silver lining out of that. Those people got dealt a super shitty hand from life. So my thoughts: abortion is a mercy. Yes. And I did it 18 weeks. Pregnancy had a 1% chance of even making it to the end, and the child would have had lifelong health issues. I still stand by my decision. I work in a PPEC, which is like a medical facility that takes care of these exact children. I see some of these kids and I definitely see them growing up and having fulfilling lives despite their impairments. Though the other half of these kids will never speak, walk, do anything without the help of a parent or caregiver. I love these kids, but seeing some kid with no ability to move any part of their body or even look like their heads are about to explode with tears coming from their eyes, with no ability to yell help me from this is just fucking kills me. Even one of these patients is like 6 feet tall and is a threat to other staff and kids because he's so strong and uncontrollable. It's depressing. I can't subject myself to that. It's selfish to keep them alive when they're never going to get better and just become more of a burden to the parents or anyone else for that matter. We found out the fetus my wife was carrying had cystic fibrosis. We aborted. It was an extremely difficult decision and we were shattered for quite some time. We still feel guilt, but we don't regret the decision. We've since had 2 amazing, healthy children, so I'm sure that rearranges things in our minds a bit. On the flip side, the couple that bought the house we lived in at the time has a son with CF. I check in on them on social from time to time and see pictures of what life would have been like for us and the child in that same house. Seeing their beautiful son makes me feel terrible. Seeing how much his condition dominates their lives and the anxiety they have about it, particularly in the COVID era, makes me feel like we made the humane decision. I hope nobody reading this is ever put in that position. If you have been or are in it now, I'm very sorry. I'm going out on a limb to talk about something incredibly personal here. I was a victim of childhood SA that resulted in a pregnancy. I grew up in a southern state and was constantly told how horrible abortion was. My child was born with a severe and terminal skin condition that made her suffer beyond imagination. Many children with her level of disease are skinned alive through natural birth. She spent months in isolation at a top hospital. During her life she had to have countless surgeries, including 2 to replace her esophagus with pieces of her colon to keep it open. Her fingers fused together despite the best treatment. She was unable to extend her leg fully due to scars. Had to have a support dog to help interrupt the pain every single time she used the bathroom. She couldn't eat solid food or attend school. She never ran or played. The pain from a dog licking a baby's face is enough to prompt them to stand and walk to avoid further pain. Of the children who reach puberty, they can look forward to their many scars becoming cancerous. She died on Mother's Day, May 8, 2011 at the age of 11. Her 22nd birthday would have been this past St. Patrick's Day. I can tell you wholeheartedly there is nothing I regret more than not having that abortion. It will always depend on the disability level, etc., but if you can save a child from suffering, why wouldn't you? This is coming from a severely disabled person battling a life-threatening illness. Severe, life-threatening, or basically any disability that would make my child's quality of life extremely poor non-exist. Yes. Absolutely. Any other less severe version of the disability? No. They should be able to see the world if they have some quality of life to be able to do so. Not to be too morbid, but I wish my parents made the more humane decision and aborted me. I'm not even 30 and I'm already connected to tubes, portacath, for the rest of my life. Treatment isn't covered by insurance, so I have to pay out of pocket, and not even getting the full treatment I need. I just cannot afford it. I don't know how much longer my body can handle hiding my life-threatening condition day in and day out, and not seeing any cure in sight. I can't even begin to explain the type of burnout I have for life. My aunt got German measles when she was pregnant and subsequently gave birth to my cousin who has congenital rubella syndrome. My cousin is blind, deaf, can't communicate, and doesn't know anyone other than her mother because of smell. The doctor in the 1970s didn't believe in abortion and didn't tell my aunt she had German measles. My aunt has spent the last 50 years looking after my cousin, having her in care homes, and is now stressing over what's going to happen to her when she passes, as my cousin will have no one. So yes, I would abort a child with severe disabilities. I would abort a child without them. My gene pool is terrible, and if I got pregnant miraculously, there's no way I'd be keeping it. I have enough inheritable diseases I could pass on, and the buck stops here. I had to make this decision in the past year. It was extremely difficult to make. I think it can be hard because you don't really know how you'll react until you're actually in the situation. It was a rare genetic condition where there is little known, but enough to know that quality of life would suffer. At first, we felt selfish for wanting to terminate because we wouldn't want to give up our own time, freedoms, etc. for the rest of our lives. Thinking about our future and my wife and I having to take care of a child for the rest of lives was frankly terrifying. Knowing they'll never be able to move out and start their own family, etc. was so sad to think. Instead, we realized we were being selfish by bringing them into the world to suffer just so we could say we did the right thing. And also thinking about our little guy and what effect that would have on him, because so much focus would be put on the other child. How would his quality of life also suffer? So far, I have no regrets at all. I think if we wouldn't have terminated and when the going got tough, I'd likely think what if we had. I would absolutely despise myself. Yes, and I did. The 16 to 18 week ultrasound is when most of these diagnoses are made. My second planned child was diagnosed with fatal severe malformations. Those were the terrifying words used by the doctors. I was 18 weeks pregnant when I had the ultrasound. The results got lost in the mail, and I wasn't informed until I was 20 weeks of age. I had exactly 8 days to make the hardest decision of my life. I went to specialists, had further tests looking into genetics, asked the experts. All said medical termination. It broke my heart for some time. But I could feel the seizures caused by the multiple severe malformations. His head, heart, face, hands, colon and foot were deformed. Even with no hope for life, it was a difficult decision to make and a hard procedure to endure. I looked at it as I was his life support system and I was the only thing keeping him alive. If I was a life support machine, I had to make the call. And I did. True story of a mom who loved her wanted child and made the decision I believed to be in his best interest. To end his life that couldn't be and never began. It isn't something I wish on anyone, but I believe it is important to say my life experience. If it was severe, probably. I'm in NICU now with my newborn who has a case of isolated Pierre-Robin sequence and a cleft palate. Very fixable, and after some plastic surgery to fix his palate and time to grow out of his small jaw and airway, he'll live a completely normal life. That being said, this journey has been incredibly stressful and hard to watch your newborn have to undergo procedures. Only comfort is knowing afterwards he's going to be totally okay. For babies' children that would have to live their entire life this way, I'd prevent it if I could. This is rough. I apologize, mine is kind of related, but I really just need an outlet for this. I hope that is okay. We lost our third son last December. He was diagnosed at 20 weeks with a rare condition called post-ureter valve, PUV. It only happens to males and is where the tube in the bladder doesn't fully open. The result is urine gets built up in the bladder, which then backs up the kidneys, which then leads to little to no amniotic fluid. During the entire pregnancy, there was no level of confidence from doctors on what the outcome would be for my son. The outcomes ranged from maybe needing a minor surgery to fix the bladder, to a kidney transplant, to possibly not making it. They just kept saying we'll know more when he's here. We'll know more when he's here. This just always kept me and my wife up at night for months, worrying and terrified. When he came, the damage was so much more extensive than we realized. The damage to his bladder and kidneys were irreversible, and his heart and lungs were also severely damaged. The second day he was in the NICU, we had a meeting with all the doctors and specialists, and I said, he's here now. What is his quality of life going to be? They all went around and said their thing. He needs a new bladder, but there's no such thing as a bladder transplant, so they need to do reconstructive surgery on it. However, he needs new kidneys as well. But they won't give a kidney to a baby that has a reconstructive bladder. Also, his lungs and heart are too fragile to go through any type of invasive surgery like that, and most likely wouldn't survive. No one would say it. None of them. So I finally said, I don't think he's going to have any quality of life. It sounds like his life is going to full of experimental surgeries that may or may not work. They all agreed. My wife and I both agreed it was best to let him go. He loves for 3 days. It was fucking frustrating to have to pull that from them. The wishy-washiness and the lack of confidence in any answer we got. Every question was met with an I don't know, or we'll have to see. I wasn't going to let that happen to my son. He wasn't going to be some test ground for some bullshit hopes. He deserves more than that after all he's went through. It was awful and traumatizing. As I'm writing this, it's flooding back raw memories that are so painful. I wanted to share though because I see parents on here who have gone through similar things. I can't say 100% what we would have done had we known he'd only live 3 days. No one knows what they'd really do unless they are put in that situation. I hope no one is ever put there. We are fortunate to have 2 beautiful, healthy boys. They love their brother that passed just as much as each other. Thanks for reading. Probably yes. I'd like to give my children the best of life and opportunity, and I'd like starting it by giving them the best genetics I can. If they have no quality of life, yes. I don't want them to suffer due to my selfishness. Why live in a shell your whole existence? 100%. I've worked with many developmentally disabled adults, and I see the lack of care they get, how many fall through the cracks, how they often can't even communicate their needs, and caregivers are often abusive. The toll their needs take on families, parental relationships, other children, even long-term planning. It's too much. You will lie awake at night wondering who will know how to care for them if you die. Who will hurt them or let them rot? Where will they live? How will you live with any kind of freedom when most family members will pull away to preserve their own? I'd terminate the second I knew for sure. In a heartbeat. Yes. This coming from a parent of special needs kids, and I see their challenges and frustrations every day. I also weep for all the things they are missing out on in their lives. It's hard to admit, but yes, and it's due to my personal experience with my brother who has Down syndrome, is low functioning, and non-verbal. He is very fortunate to be in a position where he has a lot of love, attention, and access to resources, but I firsthand know the emotional and financial toll it takes on my parents, although you wouldn't know it because they really do love and don't resent him. You lose a lot of independence and flexibility because everything you do has to work around them. Nonetheless, my parents have made it work, and I think they're one of the better examples of this situation. They didn't know that he had Down syndrome before he was born. The other consequence that I haven't seen talked about is the outcome of redirecting most of your attention to one child instead of equally spreading it across all children. I come from a relatively big family. And because my brother required a lot of attention, I do believe it negatively affected me and my other siblings. I don't resent my parents, though, because I understand that my brother needs a lot of attention. I did wish they stopped having kids after my brother, but it is what it is. I'm the eldest. We always had to lock the doors growing up because my brother would run away. He had no sense of fear. No sense of danger. He enjoyed running around. Sometimes would jump into pools. Even though I don't live with my parents anymore, it's become ingrained in me to check all the doors at my home several times throughout the day because I would have to do it all the time as a child. I don't think this is a huge deal, but it's to give you an idea of something I still deal with today. Even though I have the financial means, I don't want to lose that kind of independence in my life. Also, it's incredibly stressful. My brother also has seizures, although it has gotten better due to legal access to CBD oil. I sometimes have trouble sleeping because I don't want my parents to pass on before he does. I will help him no matter what. But you can't explain to him why mom and dad aren't around anymore. Either way, I love my brother to death and I'm always ready to help him in any shape or form. I'll always be here for him and my parents. Edit. Added more context and typo. Quality of life. The concept of LaFay would do it if the child is expected to have a very low quality of life. Never had any doubt about it. Not when I was pregnant too. The choice would be a lot harder with less severe disabilities, or if you know there might be a chance they will be not much or even unaffected. Yes, BQ someday I will die, and the system to take care of disabled adults is horrible. I have other children. And we need to be a 2-income household. How will this impact all of us? I've seen social media day in the life with mothers of babies and toddlers who just lie in a makeshift hospital in their home. What is the quality of life for that tot? I wonder. It's intense. Then of course as a parent I'm not going to live forever, which leaves my older children as legal guardians. I don't think it would be fair to our children or the child. I do not take abortion lightly. But I think we would have to.